The Kaufman Corner podcast is live here on a Sunday night. Remember, if you catch us via the podcast, you can be a part of the conversation. Catch us with the stream. We go live every Sunday night at 10 p.m. You can be in the chat room, see your questions, comments, thoughts, be a part of the overall Kaufman Corner community is what we can do. Already got a number of folks lined up in there. The good Dr. Rany Jazayerli, Soren Petro with you. I'm going to talk about the awards, what Major League Baseball got right and wrong. Bobby Witt Jr., seemingly everybody finished second. Bobby Witt Jr. in the MVP, Seth Lugo in the Cy Young, Matt Quatraro Manager of the Year, J.J. Picollo Executive of the Year. They did win the Roberto Clemente Award for Salvador Perez. Bobby Witt Jr. winning the Heart and Hustle Award. We'll talk about that, what they got right. Like I said, I don't know how you win 30 games and don't win either one of the Executive or Manager of the Year awards, but we'll get into that. We'll also talk about whether or not Bobby Witt Jr. maybe is destined to win this MVP award at some point. Anyone destined for the Cy Young Award. Then we're also going to get into what might be coming in this offseason. Trades, free agency. We're going to discuss all of that. We do it right now here on the Kaufman Corner podcast.
This is the Kaufman Corner podcast, the most in-depth analysis of the Kansas City Royals, breaking down the Royals like no one else can. Kaufman Corner is hosted by Rany Jazayerli and Soren Petro. Rany is a co-founder of Baseball Prospectus, author of Rany on the Royals, and former columnist for Grantland, The Ringer, and The Athletic. Soren is the award-winning afternoon drive host of the program on Sports Radio 810 WHB in Kansas City. Kaufman Corner is proudly brought to you by Gann Asphalt and Concrete, Kansas City's nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor, making parking lot problems disappear in Kansas City since 1994. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews, and every project comes with a written warranty. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. Gann Asphalt and Concrete, one contractor, all things parking lot. Now, here are your hosts, Rany Jazayerli and Soren Petro.
All right, thank you very much, Curtis. We do appreciate it, Rany. We had the big trade to talk about last week. No moves right now. We'll get into some of the moves we think they could be making here in a little bit, but we thought we'd focus on the awards. We didn't really have time to get into reacting to that, so we'll do it right here. I don't know, biggest snub, the one you like the most, your biggest reaction. I don't know, what's just your overall first initial thoughts when it comes to the awards that were handed out. The Royals were prominently in the running for most of them, won a couple of them, not necessarily the biggest awards, but won a couple of them. What did you think?
Yeah, I think you have to look at this from a distance, because if up close, none of the awards were really all that surprising. We knew Bobby Witt was almost certainly going to finish second. We had a strong feeling Seth Lugo would finish second. And I expected both Quatraro and J.J. Picollo to do well, but I did not expect them to win. They did not win. So I don't have any hot takes regarding the individual awards, but taken as a group, if you had told me back in March that the 106-loss Kansas City Royals were going to have a top two finish in the MVP, the Cy Young, the Manager of the Year, and the Executive of the Year, I would have said they just had a hell of a season. And they did have a hell of a season, right? And that's what this is. It's like to finish in the top two in 4 awards out of 15 American League teams, mind you. And actually, the Executive of the Year is out of 30 Major League teams, because that's the award was actually won by Matt Arnold of the Milwaukee Brewers. So to have done that, that's a tremendous organizational accomplishment. That they've got one of the 2 best hitters, one of the 2 best pitchers, one of the 2 best managers, one of the 2 best executives. That I think is the takeaway here, is that this was organization-wide. They did a good job this year, and that they were acknowledged. Maybe you can quibble over the exact placing of individual guys, but like the Royals' success was not overlooked by the voting group this year.
It was not overlooked, but was it fully embraced? I mean, let's dive right in with the most obvious. How do you go from winning 56 games to 86 games, and you're neither the I mean, I get it. Collectively, hey, you have the second best manager and you have the second best executive. That'd be great if you lost the manager to one manager over here on one team and the executive to another manager over here on another, or a general manager over here on another one. It's not how it went down. I mean, explain to me how they got this right, or do you agree that they did not get it right?
The manager of the year, I think, is the one you can have the most legitimate quibble with, because, like you said, the turnaround here. We're talking about not just the largest turnaround in Royals history, a 30-win improvement, but one of the I want to say 6 or 7 biggest single season improvements of the expansion era. Like this is not an ordinary improvement. This is really historic. Having said that, we discussed these awards in September, and I said then I think Stephen Vogt's more likely to win the award. The vibes out there at that point were that he was going to get extra credit, certainly for winning the division, and I do think that plays a part. Like, postseason success. These awards, all of them are voted on at the end of the regular season. So all the voters are looking at is the Guardians won 92 games in the division, and the Royals won 86 games and did not win the division. And I think, honestly, the fact that Stephen Vogt was a rookie manager and was taking over from a legend in Terry Francona, who had been there, 12 years, 11 seasons, I think. I think that there was some people wanted to reward the fact that he was doing this in his first season.
Yeah, right. Just like Mike Matheny, how obviously he was clearly one of the great managers of our time when he strolled right into the tough spot of being the Cardinals manager and then kind of just maintained things for a couple of years. That's clearly the mark of a top shelf manager. Excellent point.
I'm not saying I agree with that. I agree. This is the one I think, and I honestly, you know what actually probably hurt Quatraro as much as anything was AJ Hinch and the Tigers having a killer second half. I really think that if the Tigers had not come from behind and tied the Royals in the standings, he took away a lot of support, and took away, I think, more than just support, because the reality is I think Quatraro only got like 2 first place votes. Stephen Vogt got 27 first place votes. Quatraro got 19 second place votes. But I think it just took the air out of the Royals were not as much of a story in September as they could have been. And that's the other thing, is the Royals kind of collapsing, nearly collapsing at the end while the Tigers were coming up. That is, I think, when the narrative shifted to Stephen Vogt being the guy that the Guardians were going to win this wire to wire. I'm not saying I agree with it. I'm just trying
to right. Well, there's obviously a reason why they got to where they got to. But like, our purpose here, I think, is to discuss whether or not they got it right. Right? Now, and I think this is my frustration with, and I talk about this a lot with Jeff Chadilla on our Red Golden Bowl podcast about, when we talk about the MVP award. He said, these guys are not watching each one of the 32 teams as much as you think. The people that will vote on it.
Absolutely.
And I agree. And we were not watching the Cleveland Guardians as closely as the people who watch the Cleveland Guardians. I think we were watching the Cleveland Guardians as much as, anyone nationally would do.
Sure.
So from that standpoint, I don't see where. Listen, like I said, I think maintaining order is not that hard, especially in your first year. Everyone's got to impress the new guy. I really think the measuring stick for him will be in year 2, year 3, year 4, which, again, Mike Matheny fell apart in St. Louis. And so from
Barry Switzer, patron saint of first year success. So.
I also think when you have to change the culture from a 56-win team to a winning team, that's infinitely harder than just don't screw up what's already in place. I mean, look, and I'm fine if that's how they voted this award all the time, was, well, who had to maintain order. That's really the hardest thing in baseball. If there was a consensus and these awards went that way all the time, I actually disagree with you. I actually think the executive of the year is the bigger outrage. Right? I can find a reason for Stephen Vogt. I can find a reason for AJ Hinch. I will listen to that more than a guy in 2 years. And if it's a 1-year thing, okay, nobody did more in 1 year than JJ Picollo. Nobody. I mean, it's not even close.
Yeah, well, that's, to me, that's why this is the bigger outrage, is that historically the award has gone to the team, the manager of the team that sort of outplays expectations more than any other team. It's not necessarily to the best team, right? You don't see Dave Roberts winning this award every single year, right? It's not going. Andy Reid doesn't win the award, in the NFL almost ever, right? It's like you almost take for granted the teams that are just year in and year out successful. It goes to this surprise team. And if it goes to a surprise team, how on earth does it not go to the Royals? And the irony is, if Terry Francona had still been there and had done the exact same managing job, and the Guardians had the exact same record, I don't think Terry Francona wins this award, right? Like I think in that case, Quatraro almost certainly does. I think Vogt got it because he was a fresh face. But like you said, it's like he's taking over an organization that's had some success. Now the Guardians only won 76 games last year, so it's not like they were, an established juggernaut that never had an off year. But I do feel like they're giving him too much credit because he's not had a chance to fail yet. Whereas, if anything, the fact that Quatraro had a chance to fail, not because he's a failure, but because he came into a seemingly impossible situation, and turned things around in just 1 year. I mean, I agree with you. I mean, look, I didn't watch the Guardians every single day, but if I had voted on this award, I think I personally would have voted for Matt Quatraro. I mean, the thing about the Guardians is, on the one hand, yeah, it's maybe he deserves credit vote for having such a great bullpen, right? I mean, really one of the all-time great bullpens. Class A had an 0.61 ERA, and they had 3 other relievers with an ERA under 2. But on the other hand, it makes it a hell of a lot easier when you've got a bullpen that's just firing darts like that all the time, right? Like the amount of chaos that Quatraro had to manage in the late innings all season long, and pull through it. If anything, I think he probably deserves more credit for that. So I think this is the bigger outrage. If I could flip one award, I think I'd give it to Quatraro first over JJ even.
And I'll go back to the point where you said, well, they're collapsed. I don't think they collapsed. I think they were collapsing, and then it was averted, right? But they weren't collapsing with like, we can't figure out why this is going on. All the guys are here. It was obvious why. They lost one of their main hitters. They were clearly, which proved how razor thin the margin for error was with this team. How much that Matt Quatraro had just, gone across a pond, one stepping stone at a time, leaping from one stone to the next, to the next, to the next. And if he ever got a little bit off course, he was going to plunge into the lake, was obvious. Like when Vinny Pasquantino went down, yet he kept things stable, got through the tough time, steadied the ship, and pushed him on into the postseason. I know the award is voted on at the end of the postseason or at the end of the regular season, but I will point out he clearly then kept things rolling in the postseason, which would validate having given him the award. Again, it is voted on before.
The dirty little secret is that while yes, it's technically voted on at the end of the regular season, my understanding, having known and talked to a lot of the voters over the years, is that for all intents and purposes, a lot of the voting is done in the minds of the voters before the end of the season. Like by the last 2 weeks of the season, a lot of opinions are set in stone, and you need something truly dramatic to change it. And so I really do think, while the Royals, like you said, were collapsing and did not collapse, I think that what happened in the middle of September with the Royals, in danger of losing a playoff spot that it looked like they had all but wrapped up 3 weeks earlier, even though they righted the ship, I think that changed. Again, the vibes play a part of this, and I think it changed the vibes. And I don't agree with that. I think sometimes voters, I've seen other awards over the years where a guy basically hasn't wrapped up in mid-September, and then his performance the last 2 weeks of the season is terrible, and it doesn't get reflected in the vote because they kind of already made up their mind, and because these guys are thinking ahead. They don't sit down necessarily on the last day of the season and fill out their ballot with no opinions. They've been thinking about it. They've been assigned their award weeks in advance, and they've been thinking about who are they going to vote for well in advance. And so they probably already decided, I'm voting for Stephen Vogt on September the 20th or whatever.
If this were football, if this were basketball, if this were hockey, a sport I haven't covered for a long, long time, I would be more accepting. I'm a big believer in the coach of the year is the guy who has the best record, right? The coach of the year in the NFL is the guy who wins the Super Bowl or has the best record in the regular season if you want to vote at the end of the regular season. Barring you just fatten up on a last place schedule, but those are the guys that deserve it, not the guy who goes 10-7 when the pundits wrongly predicted they would go 5-12. Like out-kicking erroneous preseason assumptions is not the reason to be coach of the year, right? It just means writers made mistakes. So, but if you're going to do that award that way, okay, have some consistency on it. But I think in baseball, it's different because it is more about the general manager than it is the manager. I believe that the GM is more important than the manager in baseball, and I think it's definitely not that way in football. And I don't think it's that way necessarily in basketball either, right? But I don't want to get too far off the course. But it's definitely not that way in football, which is what most people view the lens of all sports through, is their knowledge of the NFL and how it works. That's usually how it is. JJ Picollo. So I do think that the managing that was done by Matt Quatraro, because I think if you chop it up and sell the pieces, the Royals pieces would bring far less than all the other playoff teams. Right? There's Bobby Witt Jr., who's really expensive, but even Salvador Perez is not going to bring you a lot. Well, he's old. We don't, everyone would bet that he's going to fall off, just like they were betting that he was going to fall off this year, but they didn't. Matt Quatraro had something to do with that. Matt Quatraro had something to do with picking the coaching staff that got the most out of the pitchers, that, all of the things that he did. I'm firmly of the belief that Matt Quatraro had an amazing season as a manager, and every time there was potential trouble, he steadied the ship and did a great job. But even more so is JJ Picollo, and the fact that he had an incredible offseason. Set sail with a laundry list, checked all the boxes, stayed within, despite what Joe Sheehan thinks. There are limits to how much you can spend. Sorry, Joe, if you're listening. There are limits to what you can spend. It's how much your owner says you can spend. So, grading JJ Picollo based upon the whims of what fans might think he should be splashing around with cash is irrelevant. We know he had a limit to what he could spend. And he nailed it. He told the owner, this is how much I'll spend. He spent like $100,000 more than what he said he would spend to get everything on the list. That's how they set sail this year. Okay. And then along the way, they had troubled waters. And he solved those problems at the trade deadline and then at the waiver claim deadline. No general manager did more than he did. I mean, it's like and if you're like, well, over the last couple of years, if you stretch it out and start to say, well, this general manager did this or that, he took over a moribund franchise that was archaic. He expanded the analytics department greatly, empowered the same guy, chose to keep him, didn't blow everybody out. Easiest thing for JJ Picollo to save his hide would have been to blow everybody out and be like, I'm the only guy who gets it. Everybody else is damaged goods. I'm starting from scratch. He didn't do that. He also took over a spot where everybody thought he was a boob because he was associated with the losing of the past, and he had to change that culture. There's no way JJ Picollo should not be executive of the year. None. Nothing. There's no logical reason that he does not win executive of the year.
I agree with you. He had the best year of any GM, we'll say executive, because some of these guys are president of baseball operations, some are GMs. Right. He had the best year of anybody. Now, a couple things. One is he was the American League Executive of the Year. Like, again, this is the one award that all 30 major league teams are thrown into a pile. They probably should have separate awards for both leagues. And that's why in September I said the one guy I was worried might beat him out was Matt Arnold with Milwaukee. And I think, though, that it is this award, historically more so than the Manager of the Year award, is not about the year, the team that's had the best 1 year season. There is kind of a lifetime achievement component. There is a long-term component. I'm just saying that's based on the historical way that this award has been voted on. And I think people look at Milwaukee because every market disadvantage that the Royals have applies to the Brewers, right? The Brewers are the closest parallel to the Royals in the National League and probably in all of baseball. The Milwaukee Brewers have won 86 or more games, 7 of the last 8 years, and the 8th year was the pandemic year when they made the playoffs. So and now Arnold is only been the head guy there for 2 seasons, but like David Stearns, who was their boy genius GM, left for the Mets to work for Steve Cohen and make a gazillion dollars over there, and everyone assumed the Brewers would fall off. They lost Craig Counsell, who many people consider to be the best manager in the sport, to their divisional rivals, the Cubs, just this year. Everyone thought that the Brewers would collapse. So I think this is a combination of an award to the Brewers as an organization for long-term success, and specifically the challenges of a GM losing an incredible manager and actually having, a better year than he did the year before. I completely agree with you that if this award is based purely on what happened from the end of 2023 through the end of 2024 regular season, JJ Picollo had the best year.
Is it not the executive of the year?
I'm just saying how they vote historically. If I could change one, for that reason, if I had a vote, I think I would have voted, and strike me down for calling me a homer, but I would have voted for both of our guys. for these awards. But if I could change one, I think I would do it for Quatraro. And part of that is because I think if the Royals build on this and have another season where they make the playoffs, the Royals make the playoffs next year, I think JJ will very much be in the running for the award next year. With Quatraro, you worry that it's like I said, he might have another great year next year, but if, I don't know, the A's win 85 games and, almost make the playoffs or whatever, playing in Sacramento, their manager will win. If some team, if the White Sox win 73 games, somebody might say, wow, what an amazing job done by the White Sox manager. So I'm worried that Quatraro might miss his opportunity when this year should have been his opportunity.
I just, it's so frustrating. I mean, it's so frustrating. I want to talk more. I want to talk about some of the awards that will come in the future. First of all, I want to talk about MVPs when it comes to your parking lot. If you own or manage a business, that's our friends at Gann Asphalt and Concrete. Gann Asphalt and Concrete, proudly serving the greater Kansas City area. Nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor. Locally owned and making parking lot problems disappear in Kansas City since 1994. Let Gann educate you about the most cost-effective way to solve your parking lot problems. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews. Every project comes with a written warning. Gann Asphalt keeps your parking lot safer and helps you and your business avoid unnecessary delays and costly expenses. Find Gann online at GannAsphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. Gann Asphalt and Concrete. One contractor, all things parking lot. All right, let's talk a little bit, about some of the awards they did win, right? We don't want to just do the frustration awards. First of all, Seth Lugo, let's talk about, Bobby Witt. We kind of feel like that's where he belongs, second.
Well, what's fascinating to me is that Bobby Witt you've seen unanimous first place winners before, right? Have you ever seen a unanimous second place?
No, I don't know that I've ever looked for it, but I couldn't. I know.
Well, I did.
It was impressive.
It was unique that every single voter put him on exactly second place on his ballot. It's happened one other time in the modern voting history of the voting for the MVP, going back to 1938. Ironically, that one time was last year. Mookie Betts finished second to Ronald Acuna on every single National League MVP ballot. It's probably a weird coincidence, but I think part of it is that you're seeing MVP voting, or award voting in general, is becoming much more standardized because voters take into account analytics and specifically wins above replacement to an extent that even 10 years ago, even 5 years ago, they did not. And so you're starting to see more agreement between ballots because everybody can read a WAR leaderboard, and maybe they're using that too much. I mean, it's certainly getting better, giving us better results than some of the absurd, insane voting results of the 70s and 80s. But it just means that you're seeing, just unanimous agreement. Yes, this guy, Aaron Judge, led the American League in WAR, and Bobby Witt finished second in WAR, and it was a very clear gap. And I think the gap between Judge and Bobby was just too big for anybody to go off the reservation and give Bobby a first place vote. Like, as much as I wanted to, and going into September, there was very much that possibility that Bobby could surpass him. I just feel like at the end it was hard to make a case for anybody but Aaron Judge as number one, and then anybody but Bobby Witt for number two. So it's unique, but it made sense.
All right, and so and I agree wholeheartedly. Seth Lugo number two.
To me, that wasn't the surprise, or at least the pleasant surprise. I was kind of pleasantly surprised that Cole Reagans finished fourth. And Emmanuel Clase finished third, which means the Royals had the second and third best starting pitchers in the American League. And I think that's a fair assessment. I mean, Corbin Burns finished 1 point behind Cole Reagans in fifth place. Maybe Burns, you could make an argument there. But, I mean, Reagans, his FIP was better than his ERA. Like, if you just look at hardcore analytics, I mean, Reagans was better than Lugo. Right? Like, you could, it's 6 of one versus half a dozen of another. Like, I don't know who technically was better, but they clearly were two of the 5, if not 3 best starting pitchers in the American League. That is almost unprecedented. The only year I can think of where the Royals did this well in award voting for the Cy Young, not going to be hard for you to guess, but I'll give you 1 moment to guess.
When the Royals did this well with 85, Saber
85. Saberhagen was. I'm saying specifically for Cy Young. Saberhagen won. Charlie Liebrandt finished 5th, and Dan Quisenberry finished 4th. So even that year, the Royals had 2 of the 4 best starting pitchers, not 2 of the 3 best. But they did have also Dan Quisenberry finishing tied with Bert Blyleven actually for 3rd in the vote that year. So they had 3 of the top 5 instead of 2 of the top 4. But that's the only season I can find that is comparable, and that's high praise, especially when you consider that 18 months ago, neither player was a member of the organization. So. There's your argument for JJ Picollo as executive of the year, right?
Okay, as long as we're popping trivia questions here, do you know what was the only time that they had 2 that finished top 2?
Oh, you mean a
Cy
second
Young and MVP?
Well, I would think 85 as well. Saberhagen and George Brett finished 2nd that year, right? To Don Mattingly.
I think Brett finished maybe 3rd. I think because I was thinking that you have to go back. I think Curtis told me it was 84 when Quisenberry finished like 2nd in both.
So no, George Brett finished 2nd in 85. Let me look up 84 right now. It was Quisenberry finished 3rd in the MVP vote, and 2nd in the Cy Young. So
there you go.
But that's impressive. I don't think I realized that Dan Quisenberry finished 3rd in the MVP vote in 84. So you had the same player that finished top 3 in MVP at Cy Young. But yeah, 85, they finished 2nd. I mean, let's keep in mind, we haven't had a player finish top 2 in the MVP vote, period, since 85. And aside from Lorenzo Cain, nobody's finished in the top 6, I believe, since 85. Lorenzo Cain and Bobby Witt now are the only 2 players to finish in the top 6. I think Salvador Perez topped out at 7th in his 48 home run season. So, I mean, we have not, he finished 7th. So we have not had any MVP success whatsoever. And, Bobby has changed that narrative, overnight. So, again, I have no complaints about the way either of those votes went. Yeah, it would have been nice to have brought home an actual trophy, but I'd rather have 2nd in both of those awards than to have a 1st place in one and nobody, placing in the other.
Right. I think, like, as we look forward, do we think? I think Cole Reagans is a Cy Young contender every year. Like that, he's
Absolutely.
healthy.
Yep. As long as he's healthy, I would, if I had to guess who's the better starting pitcher next year, I would go with Reagans over Lugo.
Sure.
Partly for age, partly for strikeouts, partly for just velocity, everything.
Yeah, I think also. I think Bobby Witt Jr. is a candidate to win the MVP. Will be a top 10 guy every year, maybe even top 6 or 7. I don't want to say top 5 is kind of, it's hard to be top 5 every year, but up until about the age of 29 or 30. And then I expect him to fall off. When the bat speed loses a little bit, the batting average will come down. That'll bring the on base down. He'll kind of fall out of the favor there. Reagans, of course, pitchers don't stay healthy that long, but I think as long as he's healthy, he's a contender for it.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with that. I mean, Reagans will probably place, but from one year to the next, with starting pitchers, guys just disappear, from, they get hurt, they just have an off year, he throws 110 innings, anything could happen there. So I'm not promising he will place next year, but a player of Bobby's, his CV right now, you have to think, he's going to be 25 next year. So over the next, let's say the next 6 years, between ages 25 to age 30, I'll give him even through his age 30 season. I think in the next 6 years, if I had to guess right now, I would say he will finish top 10 in the MVP vote at least 4 times.
Yeah,
at least. I mean, when you look historically at players with that broad a skill set, it's hard to find guys with that broad a skill set. Mike Trout obviously is a canonical example, and Mike Trout, I almost put him in a different category because he was so young. When he was 20, when he was like basically the best player in the American League and finished 2nd, but like he was 1st or 2nd like 7 years in a row. At least I think 1 year was 4th. But let's keep him out. I think a really good comp is actually the guy I mentioned earlier, Mookie Betts, right? Who maybe not a 40 home run a year guy, but a 25 to 30 home run a year guy. A guy who 25 to 30 steals, but also a guy who was winning Gold Gloves. In his case, it was in the outfield, but like a Gold Glove caliber defender who also could hit for average and hit lots of double. He just did everything really, really well. Starting at age 23, Mookie went in his MVP voting place. He went 2nd, 6th, 1st, 8th, 2nd. Did not place at age 28, and then 5th, 2nd, and then this year 13th. Like when you have a guy with that broad a skill set, as long as they stay healthy. And the one thing we say about Bobby, thank God, and I pray it continues, but his health record has been exceptional. There's almost no way that guy doesn't contribute in so many different ways that he's not one of the 10 best players in the league year after year after year. And I really just feel like Bobby has ascended to that level. I mean, let's not forget last year, right? Like, didn't he finish? I'll look it up right now, but I thought he placed in the MVP. Yeah, he finished 7th in the MVP vote last year.
Yeah,
which was again tied with Salvador Perez for the highest since Lorenzo Cain. So he's going to be doing this for a long time to come, I think.
All right. Is there anybody else that you think is going to knock on the door of being a top 5, maybe we'll even expand it to top 10 MVP or Cy Young candidate?
The short answer is no. That's a big, it's a big hurdle. I mean, could Vinny take that step forward and, hit 300 with 30 home runs? Yes, that's a possibility. I mean, Vinny, it's conceivable. Lucas Erceg could, have, with relievers, you just 70 good innings and a lot of saves, and suddenly you're, top 5 in the Cy Young vote. Like that could happen too. Aside from that, though, I don't see, unless, Jack Caglione comes up and, is hitting 40 bombs a year by 2026. That would be, honestly, that'd be probably the next guy on the list.
A couple things here. Tyler says, is Bobby too jack of all trades to win the MVP? No, he's not, because I think now the analytics drives a lot of that award. And so that's not the case there. And then Common brings up Jack Caglione. Yes, that's a long way off. That's a maybe. I mean, if he has more ability to judge the strike zone than his college career tells you, then yes, I think he could get there. But I think he's going to hit the ball over the wall, and I think he's going to swing and miss a lot. Right. So, I mean,
his contact rate has not been terrible given the power. Right. So, and yes, I think he's if you ask me, to predict somebody in the organization who will one day finish in the top 5 of the MVP vote, Jack Caglione has to be very high on the list, but it's not happening this coming year.
Josh says Erceg, talking about the Cy Young.
Yeah,
I'm assuming I don't think so. I mean, I like, you can mention his name because he was so good, but like, he was so good. Like, part of it's we're just dumbed down to what good relievers look like. He's very good. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to downplay him, but everybody's got an Erceg. The Royals were the one team that didn't, right? Everybody's got somebody who can come in and strike out, 12, 13 per 9. In fact, many teams have 2 or 3 guys like that. And that's where they have to get to. So I do think Erceg's really good, but there are a lot of guys like Erceg. I mean,
any really good reliever, like placing in the Cy Young vote or the MVP vote as a reliever, it requires a confluence of incredible talent and great opportunity. If he's the closer, and in addition to having 70, 75 incredible innings next year, and again, it probably needs some batted ball luck. So you might have a FIP of 2 or 2.5, but your ERA is like 120. Right? If you do that, but you're also pitching in a ton of close games and you get 40 saves and your team goes to the playoffs. I mean, that was what happened to Emmanuel Clase this year, right? Like, Clase was even better than that, but he finished 3rd in the Cy Young vote. Wade Davis, like, is Erceg capable of that? Yes, he is capable of that. Like, he's more likely to place in the top 5 of an award vote next year than Hunter Renfroe. Like, he's clearly high on the list. But yes, it's unlikely. He has the talent. He needs a lot of opportunity factors to go his way as well.
I want to talk about the Rookie of the Year. I think if there is disappointment here, and I think it's deserving, they didn't have anybody on that list, and I think that's a list that they need to have a top 5 guy in on a regular basis, right? Like, we can get excited here. We're going to talk about free agency, and we're going to talk about trades, but the farm system has to produce better talent on a consistent basis. I'm not saying every year they got to have a guy fighting for it, but they got to have that. They got to be in on that award a lot if this is going to work long haul. Agreed?
Yeah. So who I'm trying to think of like a rookie of the year candidate. Who was the best rookie on the Royals this year? Like, I was going to say Alec Marsh, but Alec Marsh I don't think was a rookie. I think he had too many innings. Yeah, he had 74 last year. who led the Royals in wins above replacement among rookies this year.
I mean, good luck.
Believe it or not, I think it might have been Nick Lofton.
Yeah,
Nick Lofton at 0.2 wins above replacement on the basis of good defense because his offense was terrible. Actually, he was tied with Steven Cruz, who threw 6 innings. So yeah, I mean, on some level, that's it tells you the performance of Quatraro and especially JJ this year was even more impressive that they did this with absolutely no help from the bullpen, right? From the farm system, which we knew going into the year. That's why this year seemed, almost especially hopeless, is that the farm system is so bad. The farm system is still bad. I think we're still 1 year away. Right now, I would be quite surprised in a good way if the Royals have anybody placed in the Rookie of the Year vote next year. If you told me right now that somebody did, I don't even know who I would guess. Caglione maybe coming up in July, and he's like the best prospect in baseball in July, comes up and hits 15 home runs in the second half. We could dream on that. But who else in Double A or Triple A is even ready to contribute this year? It's hard to think of somebody.
Well, I mean, I think Noah Cameron would be if he somehow got into the rotation.
Soren, I'm disappointed in your lack of faith in Asa Lacy winning a bullpen spot coming back from Tommy John in March. I mean, that's kind of what we're talking about when we're talking about rookie contribution. So there's still a year away. I am optimistic that come 2026, they will have multiple guys who are ready to make an impact, but they're going to have to do this next year once again without a lot of help from the farm, I think.
Yeah. No, I would agree. All right. Let's talk about the awards. They did win. They did win the Roberto Clemente Award for Salvador Perez, and they won the Heart and Hustle Award for Bobby Witt Jr. He's been the Royals nomination for that for 3 years. He wins it. Maybe they'll nominate somebody else. Once you win it, are you no longer eligible to be nominated, or can you be the Heart and Hustle guy year after year?
That's a good question. I don't actually know. But of these awards, like the Roberto Clemente Award is the more prestigious one, right? Like this is the one, it's basically
the NFL Man of the Year award.
Exactly. It's a Man of the Year, Humanitarian of the Year, obviously named after, an all-time humanitarian and Roberto Clemente. I think it's awesome that Salvador Perez won this. Yes. I think it's one of those things where, like, when you hear about an athlete with a good guy reputation, it's one thing to hear, so and so, he's a better guy off the field than he is on the field. When you actually see him win an award, like that's putting some skin in the game, because you can say anybody's a great guy, but like only one guy can win this award. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, it's one thing to say Salvador Perez is a really good guy. It's another thing to say he's literally every player on every team is eligible for this award. Only one man can win it. To win this award, it says that this isn't just hot air people are blowing about Salvador Perez. That just throughout the sport, he is universally admired for his character, for his giving nature. I mean, the press release for the things that, there are half the things on this list I wasn't aware of that he was doing, in terms of, his charitable efforts, humanitarian efforts, in the United States, in Venezuela, in Colombia. Like, he's doing stuff all over the place. He's got a busy schedule. And, we saw what he did, just kind of showing up at a kids pickup game in the Kansas City area this summer. The man just loves people, right? He loves being around people, loves helping people. It's great to see him acknowledged. And look, there's no question that the fact that he's also a superstar player helps to win this award. Like, it's rare to see this award given out to, a bench guy. But there are a lot of everyday players in the major leagues, a lot of stars in the major leagues. Only one could win this award. So I'm very happy for him, very happy that he was acknowledged. And it also just makes me feel good that, we weren't sold a bill of goods about this guy. Like, he really is he's as good as they say. And I'm very proud of him.
I agree. And I think it's a great award. And it's, I love it because it helps his Hall of Fame credentials as well. I think,
Yeah.
it's supposed to be about numbers and your play on the field, but I think this helps solidify his leadership in the clubhouse. That he's not just a leader in the clubhouse; he's a leader in life. And I think that'll go some way. I think that'll tip some people towards him. I think a lot of people have been tipping towards him. I think the fact that he's framing much better this year, getting on base much better this year is going to help him. And I think this award gives him that kind of kiss as well. So I think it's great for Salvador Perez. And yeah, I'm with you. There are a lot of things, we knew he did a lot. I didn't realize how much he did do, and so I think it's great. I can tell you that his leadership in the clubhouse is just phenomenal. I mean, it's great the way he really bridges the gap between the American and Latino players, and then that's not that carries a lot of weight because there's a lot of clubhouses that isn't there, and I think that helps their chemistry and helps the sum be more than the parts.
100%, and especially as a catcher, because he can bridge that gap with pitchers, both American and Latino, and I mean the fact that the Royals had an incredible renaissance with their pitching staff this year. I mean, like in every way, this year did so much to burnish his Hall of Fame credentials. And I was talking about like the how important vibes are when it comes to award voting. Vibes are very important for the Hall of Fame too. Like on paper, statistically speaking, Salvador Perez still has an uphill case for the Hall of Fame. But I feel like what this season did for the vibes in terms of the Royals rejuvenation, the season he had, staying with the organization, going to the playoffs again with the organization, the pitching renaissance, all of that, and then this award is the capstone of it. I think that this season had an absolutely dramatic impact on the odds that he makes the Hall of Fame. If not from the voters, then certainly from the Veterans Committee in 20 years, but quite possibly with the voters. And then the next step is to get Yadier Molina into the Hall of Fame, because I really feel like he's kind of the blocking back for Salvador Perez. He's the lead guard. Like have him make a pass and just run in his wake, Salvi.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. All right, we're going to turn the corner and talk a little bit about the off-season. First, I'll tell you, when it comes to your parking lots, if you own or manage a business, Gann Asphalt and Concrete has you covered. It's been covering people with their parking lots, all things parking lots, since the last 30 years, as a matter of fact. Gann Asphalt and Concrete, proudly serving the greater Kansas City area. Nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor. Parking lot problems, they've been making them disappear in KC since 1994. Don't risk accidents and liability in your parking lot. Get your lot restriped today. A brightly striped lot will cut down on accidents and keep your lot as safe as possible. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. Gann Asphalt and Concrete, one contractor, all things parking lot. All right, Rany, let's talk a little bit about the offseason. We set out, we gave an assignment, a trade, a free agent signing, what we want to see out of the winter meetings. Where do you want to begin?
Well, I figure we could both propose or suggest something that we think the Royals can or will do, or should do, both in terms of a free agent signing and a trade. So, Do you want to go first?
We'll split it up. Which do you want to go?
I'll start with my free agent signing. And it's not really a surprise here, because we've talked about what the Royals needs, and I've been adamant that they need corner outfielders. And even after the trade for Jonathan India, I'm not sure where he's going to play yet. And I think they have options to move him to the outfield, but if they want to keep him at second base, they could move Massey to the outfield. Yes, they could also move Massey to third base. They could. I mean, Maikel Garcia has options. Like if they bring in another outfielder, I don't think they're going to be in a situation where oh no, we have too many guys for not enough positions. Like having extra depth would be perfectly fine in my book. So I still think that they need outfield help. And if not outfield, then DH. Like they need another bat. Like it's great that they have Freddie Fermin and Salvi Perez, and they get both in the lineup, but I still don't think it's optimal to have a catcher basically being a designated hitter. If you can get a guy who does nothing but mash. But I'm going to go in a slightly different direction, because I've talked about Jock Peterson a lot on this podcast. But I actually think if I could pick one guy that the Royals should sign as a free agent, I think the guy I would go for is Michael Conforto.
Okay.
Michael Conforto, who we've talked about, I think, in previous years. He's just, he's a guy who I think would fit the organization because he does things this organization doesn't always do. He gets on base and he hits for power. He doesn't have a great average, but his secondary skill set is, I see him, and he's left-handed, and I just see him as being the perfect number 5 hitter. They've added the perfect leadoff guy. So now they have, after India, they can go India, Bobby Witt, Vinny batting third, Salvi batting fourth. They really need an established veteran left-handed hitter batting fifth. And I think Conforto can be that guy. I mean, he missed all of 2022 with an injury, came back in 2023. The power was a little bit off. The power came back last year for the Giants. He slugged 450. The on base was down a little bit. He's also lost. He used to be a pretty decent corner outfielder, and he's now not really a good corner outfielder. But I really see him as just a guy you signed to be a DH, to basically platoon. He doesn't even have to play against left-handers, but you just use him against right-handed hitters. And let him play forward. If as much to keep him healthy as anything else, because he can hit lefties. I mean, actually hit lefties better than righties last year. But he's a guy who seems to be good for about 450 plate appearances a season. And I feel like using him primarily against right-handed pitching, that's where the Royals need help. And I don't think he's going to be terribly expensive. I think MLB trade rumors, they do an estimate of how much these guys might be expected to get on the free agent market. I think they have him penciled in for 2 years and $18 million. I mean, I think that's not much more than Hunter Renfroe got last year, to be perfectly honest. I actually think that's probably a little bit of an underbid. He's only 32. I think he might get more than that, but I'd be willing to go 10 or even 12 million a year for 2 years for Conforto. I think he'd be a really good fit. The Royals need some on base and need some pop. His career on base is 348. I think we've talked about Jurickson Profar on this podcast in the past. His career OBP is lower than that. It's 331. 348, even though the last 2 years have been lower than that, I think he's a guy, if you can just let him concentrate on batting and not worry about the field at all, I think you could probably get squeeze a little more offense out of him. So he's the guy I'd like to really see them target.
Well, it's stunning. You did no effort because this is the same guy you were chirping last year, right? So you're
I said I've chirped him before. I'm not. Look, I completely admit that I've beaten the drum for this guy before. I'm going to do it again. Why? Look, I'll give you.
I don't hate it. I'm just.
But I'll give you a good example of why that works. Who did the Royals almost sign 2 years ago? Seth Lugo. Did they say, "Well, we tried and we failed. We're not going to go after him again"? No, they went after him again. And
did you hear reports that they almost signed Michael Conforto?
No, I haven't heard the reports that they're even interested in him. Okay. I'm just saying, if it works for the Royals, it'll work for me. I'm putting my chips on the same guy I put him on last year.
Right, and or maybe was it 2 years ago? Because he's been in San Fran for 2 years, so maybe it was.
It might have been our first year of the podcast. So
right,
because he was 2 years, 18 million a year. And I don't think he'll get as much this year. But the difference is 2 years ago, I think it was more pie in the sky. This year, I mean, after the season the Royals just had. And with him coming off of, 2 years not quite as good as he used to be, I think it's if the Royals want him, if they target him, they could get him. I think they could sign him. Whereas 2 years ago, I mean, I'm not sitting here telling you they should sign Juan Soto because we know that ain't going to happen. But this could happen.
Right, and I'll pass unless it's really cheap. I don't mind it if they get him cheap and you're talking, like you said, a little more than Dozier. If that's where it is, that's fine. But I think at some point you're talking about signing a guy for age 32 and 33. I don't think he's aging well. You mentioned the career on base of 348. It's been 2020 the last time he had 348 or better for his on base. 2021 344. 2022 didn't play. 23, 334, and then last year at 309. The arrow's pointing the wrong direction on Michael Conforto. So if to me that's a fallback, right? Not the one that I'm going to hatch on you is any better. You're going to please feel free to grab your pitchfork and be ready to fire away at mine because mine is riddled.
Okay, I have a pen in my hand.
Riddled with warts as well, and I wanted to get on you to give you the opportunity to rip right back at me because it's a name that I've mentioned before when we've talked about this, and mine is Yoan Moncada. I would like to solve the third base situation, and I think with Moncada there's still upside. Also, if you're not going to, this gives me a chance to point out that Kevin Seitzer still not officially been named the hitting coach in Seattle yet, right? It's coming.
I
can tell
think
you
I'm not sure. I don't know if I actually saw a press release, but yeah, it's my understanding is it's done. Which,
yeah, based upon the lack of responses I'm getting from some people, I'm quite confident it's going to happen.
right.
And it's been reported. But if you're not going to go get Kevin Seitzer, then you think you've got the people that can fix folks when it comes to hitting. So here he is. Yoan Moncada was one of the best young prospects in baseball coming up. He has had a marvelous year a year or two here or there. He is shown to be a talent, and he's 29 years old. And I think he'll come cheap, and he fills a spot that you need, and that's at third base. He's also a switch hitter, and he gets on base when he's going right. I mean, to me, he is a guy that is and he's also, I think he shades to the left-handed side is his better side. But, you're talking about a guy that career on base is 331 this year, and just, 45 plate appearances. He had a 356 on base percentage. But in years where he 149 games, 315, 132 games, 367. I mean, I think there's something there, 375 and 144 games. I think there's something there. And if I say this almost like, if you're not going to go get Kevin Seitzer, then you clearly have the guy. So fix this guy, right? It's to me, you want, and I know you want to find an outfielder, but I think outfielders are much easier, despite how hard the Royals make it look. I believe finding outfielders is much easier. And if you can find a guy who can play in the dirt, this guy could do it. And I think you have him. You have Michael Garcia still there. I think this is a worthwhile 1 year prove it guy.
I love the idea of signing him for a 1 year prove it contract, right? Like, I think cost wise is not the issue. I mean, I was actually trying to find, what an expected contract for him is. MLB Trade Rumors list the top 50 free agents, what they expect to make. He's not on their list of top 50 free agents. So presumably a 1 year, $5 million with incentives would be more than enough to get him. I think for him, it's going to be more just about like opportunity and the organization that he thinks is more likely to sort of turn him around. The talent is there. The ability to play on the dirt is very, very useful. My concern would simply be, let's put it this way. If Jonathan India is a left fielder or Michael Massey is a left fielder, then it makes a lot of sense. If you're thinking of moving Massey to third base to make room for India, which I would not hate necessarily, if, then that's great. But then I don't see it. Then the spot for Moncada is not really there. So there are a lot of moving parts here. But like if they sign him, that tells me that one of those guys is still, is a corner outfielder if they do sign him. And the issue with Moncada has been his, availability as much as it's been his ability.
By far,
right?
It's absolutely.
So,
he's also sucked at times when he's played. I mean, trust me, there's a back. I want to point this out, Dr. Zhivago. Michael Garcia equals fart noise.
I mean, I'm still a believer, but
I just hear Michael Garcia.
Yeah, well, that's exactly
what he's saying. But Cotman says, "I'm still a believer."
I'm on Cotman's corner, but I will also say, as you've rightly pointed out on this show, in previous years in spring training, and it absolutely played dividends this year, like the pitching staff, competition is a good thing.
Yeah,
right? Competition brings out the best. Like, I wouldn't like if we sign this guy. I'm not. That doesn't mean I want to trade Michael Garcia. Doesn't mean I want to give him away for a pittance. No, I still believe in him. But you know what? He might need that fire lit under his pants for him to bring out the best in him. So I have no issue there. If Moncada is willing to sign a make good contract, because I mean, one of the knocks on him has been his effort level. Like, it's been his work ethic over the years. This guy was once arguably the number one prospect in the sport. So, if he's willing to take a 1 year deal with some incentives and, knowing that if he goes down as a great year, you get a multi-year contract, I think he could be a very good fit. And I mean, there's also the potential. He's not a bad defensive player, but like, would he be willing to consider moving to the outfield? Like at this point in his career, that might keep him healthy. I mean, there's options here. The point is the talent of the overall talent skill set of Yoan Moncada is something I'm definitely interested in. Okay. But I would, if I sign him, I'm not I'm penciling him into the lineup. I am not writing it in pen because I don't know if he's going to stay healthy for 140 games. I don't know what his effort level is going to be. You certainly have to have a backup plan that if it doesn't work out, you are prepared to move on,
Okay.
And fairly painlessly.
All right. And so I'm first up on the trade.
Okay.
All right. So I'm going to trade for Cody Bellinger.
Damn you. I told you we'd have the same answer. Okay. There you go.
I've got some other names I'll mention. Luis
Okay.
Robert, who I've mentioned a number of times, would be a fallback. Ryan McMahon from the Rockies is a name also, like if you don't get Mercado. I kicked around the idea of trading for Ryan McMahon and maybe coming up with a more sensible outfielder in free agency to try to cover. I want a real third baseman. I'm going to be clear about that. I don't want to see Maikel Garcia at third base anymore because he's never going to hit good enough. Never going to hit good enough. I'm fine with Maikel Garcia being on the team and being a defensive replacement and being like, hey, our guy's on the DL for 15 days. Maikel Garcia is going to play for 15 days. Great. You're thrilled to have Maikel Garcia in that role, right? But I definitely want a third baseman. So the Mercado in free agency handles the third. And I think this team, look, I think they've found that they can identify pitchers and they can make pitchers better. I think veteran pitchers are now going to see this with the success of Michael Wacha and Seth Lugo, of them paying Lugo and then coming back in and paying Michael Wacha. I think this is going to start to be a real nice landing spot for second-tier pitchers, right? If there's a bidding war for Jack Flaherty, they're not going to win it. If there's a bidding war, I mean, I'd love to. I kicked around all the starting pitchers. Hey, did they go in on Shane Bieber? No, because the Yankees or somebody like that is going to overpay or even give a second year or something like that. I kept trying to find a way to go get a pitcher in this mix, and I think this isn't like last year's market. There isn't a walk out there that I see. A dependable guy who's not a top. You're either a top end guy or you're a top end guy that's hurt,
right,
or you're not available, right? So from that standpoint. But I do think there will be those kind of guys in years to come, and I think the Royals will be an attractive spot for them. And so what I want to do is get the lineup figured out. Like let's solve that. Let's put some runs on the board. And Bellinger again, along with Weimer, and along with center field.
Isbell.
Kyle Isbell. You've got multiple guys that can glove it. I don't think Cody Bellinger belongs in center field, but he can play center field. But if you put him over in left field, I think now you start to look kind of elite. At least you're starting to get a really nice looking ball club together, and you've got a couple of years on him, a couple of years left to make it work. Maybe it works great this year, and you extend him, and you've got him for a couple more. I don't know that you need it. I think 2 years of him is fine, right? I think, especially depending on what the price is. He's not cheap, so I don't. As far as what you have to pay him. So I don't think the asking price and prospects is going to be exorbitant, but it's not going to be nothing. And that's kind of the trick here, right? What would you give the Cubs? The Cubs want starting pitchers that can pitch now. And is it Seth Lugo? And you go with Bubic?
I don't think you have to go that high.
I don't know if the Cubs would want that. But is it Alec Marsh? Is it Chris Bubic? And clearly, and what?
I don't even think it's an and. I mean, this is one of the reasons why I have him high on my list. Like, I think let's stop. Because we've really never talked about Bellinger on this. Okay. This is a new name. So let's kind of go over what he is now. And I mean, one of the reasons why he's available is he's had one of the more exasperating careers of any player who's, finished in the top 10 of the MVP vote 3 times in his 8-year career. Cody Bellinger is, he's left-handed, which is obviously something I like. He's the rare guy who's played a lot of center field and a lot of first base, which, and so you see a lot of people saying, oh, he could fit a lot of teams' first base holes. But I don't see a lot of people talking about him in the corner outfield, which is weird because if you look at his defensive metrics, he had one truly elite defensive season when he was in right field in 2019. When he won the MVP award, he was mostly a right fielder and was a tremendous defensive player there. And which makes sense for a guy who's played a lot of center, move him to a corner, and he'll probably be really good. I see him as a right. You mentioned left field. You put him in left, and it'd be even better probably, but I would put him in right field, I think. The thing is, his offense has been everywhere from like MVP caliber when he won the MVP award 2019, 1,035 OPS, to a 2-year stretch in 2021 and 2022 where he hit and we're talking about 240 games here. He hit 193 batting average and a 611 OPS, a 66 OPS plus. He basically was one of the worst hitters in any lineup in baseball for 2 years. And then rebounded in 2023 as an MVP candidate. Like, nobody knew what this guy was, right? Like, so the Cubs were willing to give him, like, nobody knew how to value him. The Cubs gave him this, 3-year deal where essentially it was a 1-year deal with 2 player options. And he went out this past year and had kind of a year right in the middle of the extremes. He had a 111 OPS plus. He was worth 2.2 WAR. He was fine. He was not great, but he wasn't bad. To the point, though, where I think the Cubs actually did not expect him to pick up his player option. Like, he had a player option for 2025 at $27.5 million. And they were, I think, kind of expecting him to walk away. And one of the reasons why he's on the trade market now is that he was kind of an unexpected expense. Like, they've got a $27.5 million player on their payroll for next year that they're not sure they really want. It's not that he's bad. He might not be worth that much money. And so my thinking is the Royals could trade for him. And if they pick up the entire contract, you could get him without giving up that much talent. I really believe I don't even know if you have to give up Alec Marsh. You probably Chris Mubich would get him. That'd be something I'd have to consider for sure. I mean, the other thing is he has a player option for next year, which means if he's good, he walks away after 1 year. If he's not good, then you're stuck with a $25 million player option. I don't know if you can, in a trade, if you can get him to convert that into a guaranteed year, or what you maybe do is have the Cubs, if he ends up sticking around, that means he's had a bad year. The Cubs will pick up part of his salary for 2026 if he stays. Because otherwise you're getting a 1-year player. Like, I don't think you have to give up that much, but I think he would be like a better version of Conforto. I think he can, because he can play the field. Offensively, his numbers are almost identical to Conforto, plus 20 points of on base last year. He's younger than Conforto. There's a lot of variance there. He could, as we've seen from his career, he could be terrible. I mean, he was playing through shoulder problems, so I'm hoping that we can give him a pass for his terrible 2021 and 2022. He's had 2 years in a row now where he wasn't bad, and he could be an MVP candidate, as he was just last year. And if you're the Royals and you're trying to build on a shocking 86-win season, like, you have to fight regression next year. Like, right now, I think the Royals, cannot expect to be as lucky with health as they were this past year. They can't expect Bobby Witt to be quite that good next year. They can't expect Salvador Perez to be quite that good next year. They need to take some high upside bets. And while Cody Bellinger would be the most expensive player in a single season the Royals have ever paid, they've never paid anybody $27.5 million in a season before. Although, keep in mind, Bobby Witt will be making more than that in 3 years. Like, it's all, that's guaranteed. It's just not in 2025. But again, it's a 1 or at most 2-year commitment. Like, to me, this checks off a lot of boxes. It's a position the Royals need. It's a lot of money in the short term, but it's not a lot of years. And I'll always take the short-term contract, even if it's more money, than maybe you're comfortable with, because you're at least eliminating the possibility of having just dead money on your books for 2 or 3 or 4 years. I mean, look at, like, the Tigers with Javier Baez or something like that, where it's just, you've got this $25 million, $30 million contract for a guy you don't even want on your team for years to go. Cody Bellinger, it's 2 years, and you want him for next year. And there's an upside here that you're just not going to find with any free agent that you're going to get for that kind of money. And I don't think he's going to cost you a ton in terms of players, because of the contract, the unique nature of the contract, the fact that the Cubs don't know what to expect from him, and the fact that they are trying to move his salary off the books. What it takes is an owner who's willing to pick up all of that money. And I think John Sherman might be willing to.
I think when they're trying to get a stadium done, he brings name value.
That too.
He brings a commitment, and I think, worst case scenario is, assuming you want to check out the shoulder, you got to listen to your doctors.
Sure.
And if he's fine there, then you got nothing but upside, right? Like, you got a solid now that lineup with Jonathan India and Cody Bellinger, Plus, you've got lots of options in the outfield. You know, if he plays 140 games, you've got the depth to give guys a day off and have real Major League Baseball players playing every day.
And you have depth everywhere. I mean, you can
Yes.
play, if Bellinger, you pencil him in right field. Now in left field, you could still use Melendez. You could use Renfroe. Joey Wiemer could shock us and win a starting job. Jonathan India could move out there. Michael Massey, like you have a lot of interchangeable parts, and you've got a manager who's proven an ability to make it work. To give him more players than you've got positions for, and he'll find a way to get those guys into the lineup. Like we just went to the playoffs with Adam Frazier and Garrett Hampson, like playing, combining for probably 500 plate appearances or something, maybe even more than that. So I don't. I'm not afraid of having him trying to find spots. The worst hitters in that situation are Melendez and Renfroe, who at least have platoon, ability. And in Melendez's case, maybe next year will be the year you roll 7 on the craps table. I don't know. Like anything's possible.
475, by the way, for the total plate appearances for those two. And I will point out that
that's at bats. 524 plate appearances. So don't short shift me. I got it.
Did I do that wrong? Yeah,
you're right. Yeah. So they got the 500. I mean, they were basically almost an everyday player between the two of them, and they made the playoffs. So.
Well, and I also think when it comes to the money, like I'm seeing on one of the sites, like 82 million is where they're at right now. I mean, and they ran like 120 last year. So
yeah, I'm not sure if that includes like benefits, and I haven't started doing my hardcore salary breakdown.
They ran 120 here. Let me look. I will.
I have their estimated value for 2025. Right.
Their projected total allocations 107. Current payroll allocations 82. I'll go back to 24.
Yeah, that's what if you just factor in everybody with
122.
arbitration. Yeah, I see about 107. So yeah, they have. I mean, if they took on Bellinger's contract, they would have a higher payroll next year than this year, but not by a ton.
Not by much.
5 or 10 million. Which look, you just freaking went to the playoffs. The 2 playoff games alone, the revenue you made would pay for the uptick in payroll. And yeah, if you're trying to send a message to fans and get that stadium done, all of that, you could absolutely bring this guy in. And again, the long-term commitment is still fairly low. You're not committing past 2026. The only guy on your roster who is any guaranteed money beyond 2026 would still be Bobby Witt Jr.
Yeah. So, all right, there it is. We've solved all the problems. We've talked about the awards they should have won. We've given you the names.
Let's not forget the one award they did win. Let's not forget the one award that they beat out everybody, every other team. Salute to Slugger, mascot of the year.
Yeah.
I just wanted to get that in before we go.
Props. I agree wholeheartedly. Don't forget, we're always brought to you by our friends at Gann Asphalt and Concrete. Great Kansas City company, been solving parking lot problems for the last 30 years, since 1994. Locally owned and operated. They are Kansas City's best, with free consultations, no commissions, and in-house crews. Plus, every project comes with a written warranty. Snow and ice is on the way. We already had snowfall in the last couple of days. That means it's going to get in there, it's going to melt, and it's going to freeze. Little potholes become big potholes. Get that solved right now. Gann Asphalt and Concrete can do it for you. Call 816-484-3338. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com. Gann Asphalt and Concrete, one contractor, all things parking lot. For the good doctor, Dr. Rany Jazayerli, I'm Soren Petro saying thank you very much for joining us here on the Kaufman Corner Podcast.